There was an ultrasound photo on the kitchen counter. No note, no frame, no explanation. Just the blurry black and white shape of a fetus and a date scrawled in the corner with a red Sharpie. Expected, March 18th. I stared at it like it might explain itself. Like it might open its little cartoon mouth and say, "I'm not yours." Because that was the first thing I thought. Not who put this here. Not is this real. Just this isn't mine. The microwave beeped behind me. I didn't move. Something inside me was unraveling strand by strand. Too slow to stop. Too late to fix. Footsteps. Bare feet on tile. Slow. Careless. Then her voice. "Oh." That's all she said. Oh. No panic. No denial. Just one soft syllable that confirmed everything. I turned around and saw her standing there like she was late to a meeting, not caught in a betrayal that cracked 2 decades of marriage in half. "You left this here," I said. She shrugged. Shrugged. "Thought you saw it already." "Saw it." Like it was mail. Like it was a coupon. "I'm not the father," I said out loud, calmly, like it was a weather update. She didn't respond. I looked past her shoulder. The coffee pot was still full. The sky outside was turning pink. It was supposed to be a normal Thursday morning. Instead, I was calculating how long she'd been lying to me, and how deep the rot went. "You're not going to ask how I found out?" I asked. "You didn't find out," she said slowly. "You just saw it." That's when I understood. She didn't even plan to tell me. And worse, she didn't think I deserved to know. My hands curled against the counter. I wanted to throw the photo. Burn it. Scream. But instead, I smiled. Not because I was okay, but because I remembered something far worse. Last weekend, my best friend stopped by, said he wanted to borrow my jumper cables. I gave them to him. We chatted for 20 minutes. He looked tired, nervous. And at one point, when my wife came outside to bring us lemonade, he wouldn't meet her eyes. Now it made sense. It was his. And as I stood there, pretending I wasn't falling apart, I noticed something else. The ultrasound photo was already fading. Like it had been printed weeks ago. This wasn't new. This was old. Planned. Hidden. Collaborated. The front door opened. Another set of footsteps entered. My daughter. She paused in the doorway and saw the photo in my hand. Her face didn't even twitch. "You weren't supposed to see that," she said. My mouth went dry. I wasn't supposed to see it. I asked quietly. She didn't answer. She walked to the fridge like it was a regular morning, grabbed oat milk, and asked if I was still driving her to work. My wife leaned against the wall. My daughter sipped her drink. And I realized I wasn't living in a home anymore. I was living in a theater production. And I was the only one who hadn't been handed the script. That afternoon, I walked into a lawyer's office with shaking hands. But the judge? He had other plans. He didn't sign the divorce papers. Said counseling was required first. So I agreed. And when I sat in that therapist's office across from both of them, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even blink. I just smiled. Cold. Hollow. Quiet. And that smile, it scared the hell out of everyone in the room. Even my lawyer. The room smelled like lavender and false hope. You know the kind. Those offices where they try to sell you peace in a bottle and clarity through a tissue box. A beige sofa. Pale green walls. Framed quotes like, "Healing begins with honesty." One of them was crooked. I kept staring at that one. The therapist's name was Janelle. She had soft eyes, a voice like rain, and a notebook she never stopped writing in. But it was all a prop. I could tell. She wasn't here to listen to me. She was here to guide reconciliation. The phrase the judge used when he rejected my divorce petition and told us we needed 6 sessions of marriage counseling first. 6 sessions. 6 hours of pretending I was willing to work things out with a woman who carried another man's child and a daughter who helped her hide it. I sat down first. Didn't look at either of them. My wife sat across from me with her hands folded in her lap like a student at a parent-teacher conference. Summer sat beside her. Not as a child. Not as an observer. But as a wall. A defense. She wasn't there to understand. She was there to protect her mother from me. Janelle began with a gentle, rehearsed voice. "Why don't we start by talking about why we're here today?" Alisha answered before I could. "We've hit a difficult season. There's been a breakdown in trust, and Ellis has been struggling emotionally." I didn't even blink. She said it so softly, so convincingly. If I didn't know better, I might have believed her. Summer added, "He's been acting paranoid. Going through our things. Accusing Mom without evidence." Without evidence? I turned my head, slowly, and looked at her. No words. Just a look. Her eyes flicked down for half a second. Guilty people always do that. I see, Janelle said, nodding like she understood the shape of the iceberg without realizing she was standing on top of it. I finally spoke. Quietly. Can I ask a question? Of course, Janelle said. I turned to Alisha. Why did you leave the ultrasound photo on the kitchen counter? Her breath caught. Janelle blinked. Ultrasound. I kept going. Was it carelessness? Guilt? Or were you testing me? Seeing how much you could get away with before I broke? Alicia's hands clenched. Summer whispered, stop it. Or, I said, still staring at her mother. Was it his idea? Did Derek tell you to do it? Did he want to get caught so he wouldn't have to keep sneaking around with my wife? Alisha stood up. This isn't the place. This is exactly the place, I said, still seated. We're here to be honest, right? Janelle finally tried to regain control. Ellis, maybe we should take a step back. I'm not stepping back, I said. I've been stepping back for 20 years. I stepped back when I noticed the dinner stopped, when the affection disappeared, when the laughter turned mechanical. I stepped back so far that I walked myself out of my own marriage without realizing it. The room went dead silent. Then I turned to Janelle. Do you want to know the worst part? She didn't answer, but I told her anyway. They didn't just lie to me. They built a life around the lie. They made it part of their routine. They took comfort in it. My daughter, who I raised, who I read to every night until she was 12, looked me in the eyes and lied because it was more convenient than telling me the truth. Summer's face twisted. I didn't want to hurt you. Then why did you protect the man who did? That broke her. She looked down and said nothing for the rest of the session. Janelle scribbled harder in her notebook like she'd finally found something worth writing down. Alisha looked like she was about to cry, but I didn't care anymore. Not in the way I used to. Because those tears, they weren't for me. They were for the fantasy collapsing around her. And I wasn't finished. As the session ended, Janelle said we'd made progress. That was her word. Progress. I stood up, smiled again, the same cold, unsettling smile I'd worn in the courtroom, and said, I agree. We're getting closer to the truth, but we're nowhere near done. Then I walked out before they could reply. As I stepped into the parking lot, I saw Ron, my lawyer, leaning against his car with a file in his hand. He handed it to me. You might want to look at page 3, he said. I did, and that's when the story shifted, because what I saw on page 3 changed everything. I didn't open the file in the parking lot. Not right away. I got in my car, locked the doors, and just sat there staring at the brown folder Ron had handed me. It was thick. Weighted. Whatever was inside had been printed in a rush. I could see some of the pages were slightly misaligned, like they'd been fed through the office copier in a panic. I should have opened it then, but something about it terrified me. Not in a dramatic way, but in that deep, nauseating gut-level sense that once I looked inside, there was no going back to the version of the story I thought I knew. So I drove. Not home. I couldn't stomach going back to that house. Not with Alisha sitting on that couch she used to pretend was our favorite when guests came over. Not with Summer pacing the hallway upstairs like she didn't just help rip out the foundation of our family. I ended up at the park. The one with the little fishing dock no one uses. The place I used to take Summer to feed ducks when she was little. I remember how she used to name them. Socks, Captain Beak, Mr. Loud. I remember her smile. I don't remember when that smile stopped belonging to me. I sat on the bench under the dead-looking maple tree, opened the file, and flipped straight to page 3 like Ron told me. It wasn't what I expected. It wasn't divorce paperwork. It wasn't medical records. It was an image. A screenshot. One still frame, taken from what looked like a security camera in a bar parking lot. Alisha. Derek. Embracing. Kissing. Timestamp. 2 months before the ultrasound photo. She was already cheating back then. But it wasn't the kiss that wrecked me. It was what came after. Because in the next photo, blurry and zoomed in from the far edge of the frame, a third figure stood beside a car with its headlights off. Watching. Summer. My daughter was there. She saw it. She wasn't told later. She wasn't manipulated or tricked. She stood 10 feet away while her mother kissed my best friend behind a bar, and she just stood there, arms crossed, expression blank. And you know what she did next? She handed her mother her purse. There it was. The moment captured in pixels, burned forever into evidence. The betrayal wasn't just hidden, it was participated in. Organized. Helped. I closed the file, shaking, heart pounding. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I wasn't even sad. I was empty. How do you react when you realize your own daughter picked the person who destroyed your marriage over you? The next few hours are a blur. I remember pacing the walking trail. I remember calling Ron, barely able to form words. She knew. I kept saying. She was there. She saw it. He was quiet for a long time. Then finally, he said, Ellis, we may have leverage now. That word made me feel sick. Leverage? I wasn't playing a game. I wasn't trying to win a divorce. I was trying to survive a reality where my own blood didn't think I mattered. That night, I didn't go home. I checked into a motel across town. A cheap one. Mold smell in the AC, scratchy sheets, old vending machine. But at least it was mine. At least it didn't lie to me. I stared at the ceiling until sunrise, planning my next move. Because if my wife and daughter wanted to choreograph betrayal, then fine. Let them perform. But I was done being the quiet audience. I was going to write the ending myself. And they wouldn't like how the script flipped. By morning, something in me had shifted. I didn't cry. I didn't scream into the pillow or punch walls or call Ron in a rage. I just lay there in that cheap motel bed staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me like it was trying to hypnotize me out of my own life. I think that was the first time I really understood that grief and rage weren't always loud. Sometimes they were clinical, cold, even strategic. Because that's what my mind was doing now, strategizing. Not revenge. Not yet. But clarity. I didn't want apologies. I didn't want them to beg. I wanted to understand why. Why did Alisha cheat? Why did she hide it? Why did my daughter help her? And why, even now, did they still act like I was the problem? I got out of bed, showered, threw on yesterday's clothes, and drove back to the house. Not to speak. Not to argue. I didn't even want them to know I was there. They were gone when I arrived. Alicia's car was missing, Summer's too. Perfect. I let myself in through the side door, walked past the dining table that hadn't hosted a real family dinner in years, and into the kitchen. It was exactly as I left it. Polished, hollow, soulless. A stage set for a happy life that didn't exist anymore. But I didn't stop there. I went upstairs. Not to our bedroom. I went into Summer's room. I hadn't stepped foot in it since she turned 16 and demanded I knock every time. It still smelled like vanilla lotion and hair products. Posters of indie bands on the wall, a mirror framed in fairy lights, a makeup bag half zipped on the desk, and on the floor by her bed, a laptop. I hesitated. Not because I was afraid to snoop, but because I already knew what I'd find would break me even more. I opened it. No password. There was a folder on the desktop labeled Summer Class 2023, but inside was a video file. No title, no context, just a timestamp, 2 months ago. I clicked it, and I felt my stomach fall through the floor. It was recorded at our house, our backyard. Derek was standing by the fire pit. Alisha sat beside him, barefoot, wine glass in hand, laughing in a way I hadn't seen in years. And then Summer's voice from behind the camera, giggling. Say something for the baby when he sees this in 10 years. Derek leaned closer to Alisha and kissed her cheek. To the beginning of everything. Summer laughed. You guys are so weird. Then the camera cut out. That wasn't just evidence. That was a family. A new family. And I wasn't in it. They were documenting their betrayal like it was something beautiful, a memory worth keeping, a moment to cherish. My daughter wasn't just complicit. She was celebrating it. And that made something inside me go quiet. Permanently. No more confusion. No more waiting. No more sessions pretending I wanted reconciliation. That night, I didn't go back to the motel. I booked a consultation with a second attorney. Not Ron. Someone Alisha didn't know. Her name was Lena Vargas. No nonsense. Former corporate litigation. She listened to me talk for 20 minutes and didn't flinch once. Then she leaned back, folded her arms, and said, Do you want this to be clean? Or do you want this to be unforgettable? I looked her in the eye and said, I want them to remember this for the rest of their lives. She smiled. Then we'll start with your name. My name. You're going to vanish, Mr. Ellis. From their bank accounts. From their credit lines. From the house deed. From the family plan. They won't see it coming. You've been their foundation for 2 decades. I'm going to show you what happens when a foundation pulls itself out from under a house built on lies. I didn't speak for a full 10 seconds. Then I nodded, because I realized I wasn't grieving anymore. I was building something. A storm. The first few days after I met with Lena, I didn't feel like myself. The person I had been was slipping away, like a faded reflection in a cracked mirror. The man who had spent 20 years trying to fix, smooth over, and pretend his family was something it wasn't was gone. And in his place, something colder, something quieter. I had always been the good guy, the reliable husband, the supportive father, the man who took his role seriously. But now, standing in my own house, I felt like an intruder. It was strange how quickly the world flips on you. One moment you're a man of routine. Wake up, coffee, kiss your wife goodbye, go to work. The next, you're a ghost. You walk through your own front door, and nobody even notices. I wasn't there for them anymore. And I had no intention of being. I went to the bank first. I didn't need to drain accounts or steal money. I needed to set the groundwork. Lena had told me about a simple transfer of assets that wouldn't set off alarms. I moved things around, subtle shifts, the kind that would only be noticed when it was too late. I opened a few new accounts in my name, parked away from prying eyes. I got a new email address, a new phone number, and told no one about it. Not even Ron. Lena's advice was clear. Let them believe you're still playing the game. Let them believe you're still the guy who's hurting. Then pull everything out from under them without a sound. The hardest part wasn't making the moves. It was letting it all sink in, to accept that my family, Alisha, Summer, Derek, had already written me out of the narrative. They thought they were clever, thought they had pulled off the perfect lie, but they had no idea how much I had already seen, how far I had already gone. I couldn't help but laugh as I walked out of the bank. The feeling of freedom, that's what it was. Not anger, not vengeance. Freedom. For the first time in months, I felt like I was in control again. The house had become a shell of its former self. Alisha, playing the perfect wife when she had to, and Summer, colder than ever. The tension was suffocating, and they didn't even know what was coming. Not yet. Not until I was ready. They thought I had given up. But I was only getting started. I started taking small things. Not out of malice, not yet. But it felt like reclaiming pieces of myself. The old fishing rod I'd left in the garage for years, the one Summer used to beg me to take her to the lake with. The tools I kept in the basement that I never used, but were always a reminder of the man I used to be. I knew they'd notice, eventually. And they did. The first time Summer asked, "Where's the rod? Dad, what happened to it?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her. She didn't like that. She could feel the change. Couldn't quite put her finger on it, but she could feel the space between us growing wider. But the real move came 2 days later when I made the call to the real estate agent. The house was mine, at least for the next few months. No more names on the mortgage. No more joint ownership. Lena's advice had been clear. Sell the house. Force their hand. They won't know what hit them. So I did. I put the house on the market. I arranged for the sale to go through in a matter of weeks. And as soon as the offer came through, I signed the papers without hesitation. My name was off that deed. It was a symbol, a cut, a final severing of all the ties I had been too afraid to cut before. I hadn't told Alisha yet. I didn't need to. It didn't matter anymore. That evening, as I sat in the empty living room, staring at the quiet space I used to call home, I realized how much power I had taken back. It wasn't the money. It wasn't the house. It was the choice. The ability to make them feel small, uncertain, and lost in the life they thought they'd controlled. I still didn't know what the final act would look like. I hadn't figured out how to destroy them completely. Not yet. But I didn't need to rush. They had weeks to figure it out. And by the time they did, I'd already left. I had to leave. The house was no longer a place for me. It was a mausoleum for memories. A monument to everything that had gone wrong. And I was done looking at it. I packed a bag. Left my old life behind. But I didn't walk away in defeat. I walked away as a man who had finally seen the truth. The family I thought I had built wasn't mine anymore. It was theirs. Theirs to destroy. And they had done it. But they weren't ready for what came next. I wasn't going to be the guy they thought I was. The weak one. The guy who would sit around, waiting for apologies that would never come. No, I wasn't going to be the one asking for closure. I wasn't going to beg for understanding. What they didn't know, what they still didn't understand, was that I had already made my peace. It wasn't with them. It wasn't with the marriage. It wasn't even with the life I had wasted, or the people who had used me. It was with myself. By the time I sold the house, everything was already in motion. They hadn't seen it. They hadn't realized how the walls were starting to crumble, piece by piece. And they wouldn't. Not until it was too late. Alisha had started noticing things were off. The small things at first. The credit card bill that had a few unexpected withdrawals. The lack of communication about the house, and where things stood. She asked me one evening, sitting at the kitchen island, "Where's the money going? What's going on with the accounts?" I just shrugged, didn't look up from my phone. "It's all sorted, don't worry." She wasn't convinced, of course. But I didn't care. I wasn't here to explain myself anymore. I was here to watch the inevitable unravel. And it would. Slowly. But surely. Summer, on the other hand, had a different reaction. She came into my room the night I signed the papers to sell the house. She stood at the doorway, arms crossed, looking more like a stranger than the daughter I used to know. "You think this is over, don't you?" I didn't answer her right away. I didn't have to. I had nothing to explain. She'd already made her choices, and I had already seen them for what they were. "No, Summer. It's not over. But it's not for you to decide how it ends." Her eyes narrowed. "You can't just leave and think everything will be fine. It's not that easy." "I never said it would be," I replied, meeting her gaze. "But I don't owe you or your mother an explanation for anything anymore." She looked like she wanted to argue, but she didn't. Instead, she walked out of the room, leaving me alone with the silence that had started to feel more like a relief than a punishment. The hardest part wasn't cutting them off, though. It wasn't walking away from the life I thought I had. It was watching the pieces fall into place, seeing them scramble for control, seeing them fail to understand what was happening. The call started coming a few days after I signed the papers. Alisha, of course, trying to be the one to fix things, always playing the victim. "Ellis, we need to talk about this. The house it's all I have left," she said over the phone, her voice shaky. "You're making a mistake. We can fix this." But I didn't respond. I didn't need to fix anything. What they had done to me, to us, was irreversible. What they had stolen from me wasn't just trust. It was the life I had spent years trying to build, brick by brick, memory by memory. And now that life was crumbling in their hands. The calls didn't stop. Summer, too, tried reaching me. She sent me a text. "I know what you're doing. Please don't do this. It's not too late." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. But what came next? That's what made everything real. Alisha showed up at the motel I had been staying at. I hadn't told her where I was staying. I hadn't said a word after the house went on the market. But there she was, standing in the parking lot, looking around nervously like she was expecting me to come charging out. The image of her, once the woman I had loved, now reduced to this. A woman with nothing but questions and an empty house, hit me harder than I expected. I didn't move. I didn't approach her. She saw me watching her from behind the blinds in my room. Her eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, there was a shift. A quiet acknowledgement that this was the end. I wasn't coming back. Not to her. Not to the life we had. She raised her hand like she was about to wave, but then stopped. The weight of everything hit her at that moment. And in that brief silence, I understood. She realized what I had already known. She had lost me. And for the first time since everything fell apart, I felt free. It started with a phone call. I was sitting in the small, dimly lit diner I had been frequenting for the past few days. I hadn't told anyone where I was staying, but word somehow got out. I didn't care. The isolation was what I needed. No distractions, no noise. Just me, my thoughts, and the cold coffee in front of me. That was when the call came. The number wasn't saved in my phone, but I recognized the voice immediately. "Ellis, it's Derek." I didn't say anything for a moment. I hadn't spoken to him since the day I saw the security footage. He had always been my best friend, the guy I trusted with everything. But now he was just another name on the list of people who had betrayed me. And yet, despite everything, I didn't hang up. "What do you want, Derek?" My voice was cold, distant. I couldn't pretend anymore. There was a long pause. "I think we need to talk. About everything." I let out a breath, leaning back in the booth, staring at the cracked laminate table. It was like a bad movie. The phone call you dread but know is coming. The conversation that drags on, and you're stuck in the middle, wondering if anything will ever be the same again. "I think you owe me an explanation," I said, my grip tightening on the phone. "An explanation for what? You and Alisha? Or for what you did to my daughter?" His silence told me everything I needed to know. Finally, he spoke again, but his voice was different, shakier. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen, Ellis. It just had happened. I never wanted to hurt you." I laughed, bitterly. "You didn't want to hurt me? You've been sleeping with my wife for months. You've been lying to me for years. And you think I'm going to buy this, I didn't mean it crap?" Another silence. Then, Derek sighed heavily. I'm not trying to justify it. I'm trying to make things right. You have to understand, Alisha, she was different. She was what I needed. I didn't need to hear it. I didn't care about his excuses anymore. It's done. You've had your chance to fix this, Derek. You don't get to rewrite the story. You don't get to come back and make it all better with a phone call. There was a desperation in his voice. Ellis, please. I know you're angry, but I'm willing to make things right. You can't just walk away from everything we had. Had? I almost choked on the word. That was never real. You were never my friend. You were just waiting for the right moment to steal my life. I slammed the phone down, shaking with a mix of anger and something else I couldn't quite place. The calm I had felt over the past few days shattered in an instant. The pieces of my life were slipping through my fingers, and no matter what I did, I couldn't stop it. I left the diner, not bothering to pay for the coffee. The weight of everything hit me as I stepped outside. The phone call, Derek's words, the knowledge that the life I had tried to build was gone. It was all too much. I had to do something. I had to act before it was too late. By the time I got back to the motel, I knew what I had to do. It was time to turn the tables. I called Ron. I need you to move fast. I'm pulling everything out. Every last piece. Make sure the house sells, and make sure they don't have access to any of it. And I need everything. Bank accounts, credit cards, property deeds. Make sure they don't get a dime. There was a pause on the other end. Are you sure about this, Ellis? This is going to get messy. It's not just about the house anymore. Once you do this, there's no turning back. I know, I said, my voice cold and steady. I'm done. I can't let them think they can just walk away from this. Not after everything they've done. I hung up before he could say anything else. I had never been a man who liked to make waves. I had always been the one who stayed quiet, who waited for things to settle. But now, I was ready to burn everything down. I wasn't going to be the victim anymore. Not the man who got cheated on, lied to, and abandoned. I was going to be the one who took back control. The next morning, I packed up my things. I had the rest of the day to make sure everything was in place before I left town. I couldn't stay in the same city anymore. I needed a fresh start. A place where I could disappear, where no one would recognize me, where no one would try to remind me of the life I had lost. I stood in front of the mirror, looking at myself for the last time in that reflection. The man who used to be Ellis, the reliable husband, the supportive father, was gone. But the man who was about to walk away, free and unburdened, was someone new, someone they would never see coming. As I checked out of the motel and drove away, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. This was the point of no return. I had burned every bridge I needed to. I was no longer just reacting to what had been done to me. I was creating the end of this story on my terms. And I was going to make sure they would never forget it. It's funny how life can surprise you when you least expect it. How, when you think everything's been destroyed, when you're sure there's no way forward, the universe offers you something you never imagined could exist. I drove for days. No real destination. Just road after road, town after town, passing through cities where no one knew my name, where I wasn't the man who had been betrayed, the man who had been lied to. I wasn't the broken husband or the furious father. I was just another guy in a pickup truck, heading nowhere and everywhere at the same time. I stopped in a small town on the outskirts of North Carolina, a quiet place where nothing seemed too important, but it had a warmth to it that I hadn't felt in years. I checked into a modest inn, the kind where you can see the stars from your window at night. It felt right, like I had stepped away from the life I had been living and was now starting something fresh. For the first time in months, I slept without nightmares, without visions of Alisha and Derek in summer, without the weight of their lies crushing my chest. The next morning, I sat in a small diner, eating a breakfast of eggs and toast, and I realized something. I had started to heal. It wasn't instantaneous. It wasn't the kind of healing that happens after a single moment of clarity. It was gradual, like the sunrise. Slowly, the darkness of my past started to fade, and a new light began to fill the empty spaces in my heart. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if I would ever fully forgive Alisha. I didn't know if I could ever look Summer in the eye and feel the same way about her. But I didn't need to. I had learned that I didn't have to be stuck in the past, chained to the people who had hurt me. I had the power to choose my own path, to decide what my story would look like from here on out. A week later, I enrolled in a local woodworking class. I had always wanted to learn, but I never had the time before. And for the first time in ages, I felt excited about something that wasn't tied to my old life. The instructor, an older man named Dave, was kind but direct. He taught me how to carve and shape wood into something beautiful, something functional. As I worked with my hands, I realized how therapeutic it was. It was simple, grounded work. Nothing fake. Just me, the wood, and the steady rhythm of my own thoughts. I started to rebuild myself, piece by piece. Not with anger, not with vengeance, but with a calm, quiet determination. The world had turned upside down on me, but now I was standing firm, stronger than I had ever been. And that strength didn't come from hurting the people who had hurt me. It came from healing. Then, one afternoon, my phone rang. It was Ron. I hadn't spoken to him in weeks. I thought maybe he had some update on the final stages of my divorce. Instead, his voice was almost apologetic. Ellis, I know this is difficult, but Alisha's lawyer reached out. She wants to settle things. She says she's willing to drop all claims if you'll agree to a few things. I felt a strange sense of detachment. What's the catch? There is none. She just wants to move forward. And Summer's been trying to reach you. She says she's sorry. My chest tightened. I hadn't expected this. I hadn't expected them to reach out. I had thought they would just keep going, pretending I didn't exist. But here they were, finally realizing that the man they had known wasn't coming back. Not because I wasn't willing to forgive, but because I had already moved on. Because I had grown. I'll think about it, I said. And I meant it. I didn't need to rush back into their world. I didn't need closure anymore. I didn't need answers. But I did need peace. And as I sat in that quiet diner, thinking about the road I had walked, the life I had left behind, I realized something important. It wasn't their forgiveness I needed. It was my own. I had spent so long trying to fix a life that wasn't mine anymore. But now I was free. I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I was at peace. The next few weeks were quiet. I worked on my wood projects, took long walks along the lake, and made new friends. People who didn't know about my past. People who didn't ask questions. And I didn't answer any. I didn't need to. I had left the past behind. One evening, as I sat on the porch of my little cabin watching the sunset, I thought about the person I had been. The man who had let others dictate his happiness, who had stayed silent for too long, who had been afraid to stand up for himself. That man was gone. The man sitting on that porch, he was the one who had learned to forgive himself, to embrace the future no matter what it held. And for the first time in years, I felt a smile spread across my face, not because of anything I had lost, but because of everything I had found. The road ahead was mine to walk, and no one could take that away.